Are you like me and thought that the grease pencil was only for people who can draw well? Well, actually, you don't need any drawing skills to create something cool with it. In this tutorial, we'll create a vlog-style travel map animation and test some special grease pencil modifiers and effects. Next, I'll show you how to quickly create animated overlays for your videos, and then how to use them directly on top of video clips. And if you really don't want to draw at all, I'll also show you how to convert images or image sequences into grease pencil objects. Use the timeline to skip ahead to any section you might be interested in. Let's get started.
Take a screenshot of a map and save it somewhere. Open Blender and enter Top View by holding the tilde key and clicking Top. Add the image as Mesh Plane. Switch to Material Preview to see the map shading. Then add a camera and move it up a bit on the Z-axis. Press 0 on the numpad to enter camera view again. Set the resolution and frame rate you want. Go to the camera object data properties and change the lens type to orthographic. Changing the Z-axis doesn't do anything with an orthographic camera. Instead, use the orthographic scale to zoom in. Then use the X and Y axes to move the camera to the first location on the map. Now let's start adding some stuff. First, add a blank grease pencil object. Next, hold Tab and enter Draw mode. You have various brushes to choose from at the bottom left of the screen. For this project, I'll start by using the Ink Pen Rough. Hold F to change the size of the brush. Then left-click and drag to draw. Shift F changes the strength of the brush. And holding Ctrl while drawing activates the eraser. At the top of the viewport, change the stroke placement to surface with an offset of 0.01. This allows us to draw strokes on the map surface without intersecting it. I'll start by drawing a circle around the city name. Then draw a line from the first location to the next. I recently went traveling from Chengdu to Zhangjiajie in China, so that's the route I'll use. Then draw a circle around the next location. We want to add animations to these strokes separately, so with the grease pencil object selected, hold Tab and enter Edit mode. Select a vertex on the route line and press L to select Linked. Then press P and separate selection. Do the same for the city circle. I'll rename them Location A, Route, and Location B to stay organized. Each stroke has a keyframe in the timeline that controls when it appears. I'll move the first stroke forward 1 second. Then go to Modifier Properties and add a Build Modifier. This will automatically animate the stroke so it appears in the same order it was drawn. It's a bit slow, so I will lower the number of frames to 10. That's better. Next, select the route stroke and move its starting keyframe forward a bit in the timeline. Add a new build modifier to it and increase the number of frames to 450. I'll also increase the end frame to 1000 so that we have enough frames to work with. A camera will move along the route, so a slow pace is easier on the eyes. Next, input the start frame plus the animation length to get to the end of the animation. Then move the start frame of the last circle to the current frame. Add a build modifier with a frame count of 10 again. And this is how the animation looks so far. To make the stroke wiggle, add a noise modifier. Right now it's a bit too strong. You can fix this by lowering the position value. Then I'll increase the thickness and noise scale values a bit. That looks fine to me. To add the same noise settings to the route stroke, select it, then Shift select the circle. Click on the drop-down arrow in the noise modifier and click Copy to Selected. Great! Now let's do the same thing for the last circle. Select it, Shift select the route, Copy to Selected. To make the route stroke dashed, select it and add a Dash Modifier. Then you can adjust the dash and gap numbers to your liking. Next, let's animate the camera. First of all, install the native Blender extension called Grease Pencil to Curves. Make sure that it's also enabled in add-ons and then save preferences. The tool can then be found in the Edit tab of the sidebar. Change the spline type to Bezier and click Convert GP to Curve. This creates a Bezier curve along the route path and the original stroke is temporarily hidden. With the newly created curve selected, hold Tab and enter Edit mode. Then press V and set the handle type to Automatic. This will make the curve smoother. Next, add a new empty object. Shift select the curve, press Ctrl P and click Path Constraint. Select the empty and go to the Constraint properties. An Auto Path constraint has been added. Enable Follow Curve. At first, the empty object snaps to the wrong location. But pressing Ctrl A and applying all transforms fixes that. Now we can use the offset parameter to animate the empty along the curve. Go back to the frame where the route animation starts and make it visible in the outliner again. Select the empty, right-click the offset parameter and insert a single keyframe, or just hover over the parameter and press I. Then go to the frame where the route animation ends. Input an offset of -100, which is the end of the curve, and insert another keyframe. Now the empty follows the curve at the same speed as the build modifier. To make the camera follow the curve, select the camera and add a child of constraint. Select the empty as the target using the eyedropper tool. I only want the camera to follow the location of the empty, otherwise it becomes a bit too messy, so I'll disable the rotation and the scale. The camera might snap to another location, but pressing Set Inverse will reset it. That looks better. I want to keep the camera inside the map borders. To do this, I'll animate the camera's location while it still follows the empty. Go back to the start frame. Hover over the location parameters and press I to insert keyframe. Then go forward in the timeline to where the camera starts to glide outside the map border. Adjust its location and insert another keyframe. Scrub through the timeline, adjust the location, and insert keyframes where necessary. Now it looks fine. You can also parent an image to the empty, such as a plane or a car. Add a new image as mesh plane. For fun, I'll just add an image of myself, where I'm leaning back and enjoying the ride. Select the image and add a copy location and a copy rotation constraint. Select the empty as the target using the eyedropper tool for both constraints. This will make the image follow the location and rotation of the empty. Then scale the image down to fit the route. Before the route animation starts, I want to animate the image appearing. To do this, I'll just go back 10 frames, set the image scale to 0, and insert a keyframe. Then go forward 10 frames again, input the original scale, and insert another keyframe. This creates a short, simple scaling up animation. To make the motion less linear, I will open a new window and set it to the graph editor. Enable Normalize to see the graph better. Hover over the timeline and press A to select all keyframes. Then go to Key Interpolation mode and click Back Interpolation. This creates a slight curve in the graph, which overshoots the scale a bit before the end. This is subtle, but creates a more interesting animation. Now let's play the animation until the end. Look at me relaxing. I love traveling. At the last frame, I want to animate the image scaling down to 0 again. Insert a keyframe at the current scale. Move forward 10 frames and set the scale to 0. The back interpolation is still active for the whole graph, but this time I want the scale overshoot to happen at the beginning of the curve. Drag and select all keyframes at the beginning of the curve, then go to Key and change the easing type to Ease In instead of the default Ease Out. And now it works like I want it to. I'll also select the circle animation and move it forward 10 frames. Now the circle starts to appear after the image has been scaled down. Next, you might have noticed that the dashed line leaves a trail coming directly from my crotch. I don't want this, so I'll select the curve that everything is parented to and move it up a bit on the z-axis. That's better. But if I hit F12 to render, the line still appears on top of me. To fix that, go to the View Layer properties and enable the Z pass. This will make Blender calculate the depth correctly. To change the color of strokes, go to the Material properties and adjust the base color. I'll make them red. All strokes were separated from the same object, so they already share the same material. Change to Rendered Preview and the render engine to Eevee. Then under Color Management, change the View Transform to Standard. This will make the colors appear brighter. Next, Grease Pencil has special effects, such as making the strokes glow. This becomes clearer when the world background strength is lower. I'll leave it at 1 and add another effect called Shadow. This lets us add shadows underneath the strokes without using lights. You can adjust the offset values to move the shadow. Increase the blur samples to make the shadow look less pixelated. I'll add the same shadow effect to the other strokes. To stay organized, I'll place the objects into their own collections. Another fun thing that you can do with a grease pencil is to draw text. Add a blank grease pencil object. Hold Tab and enter Draw mode again. This time I'll use the ink pen. Write the text, and then add a build modifier. I'll animate its reveal over 30 frames. When the image on me pops up, I'll animate the text scaling down. But now the origin point of the text is still at the world origin, so I'll right-click, go to Set Origin, and click Set Origin to Geometry. Now it scales from the center of the text. Hover over the scale and press I to insert a keyframe. I'll go forward 10 frames, set the scale to 0, and insert another keyframe. set the interpolation to back, and the easing type to ease in. At this point, I'll add another blank grease pencil object. I'll use the same ink pen with a slightly wider stroke. I'll animate the scale again. But this time I'll choose the Bezier interpolation. This is because I want to adjust the handle to create an even stronger overshoot to make it pop a little bit more. Rotate the text a bit. Copy the noise modifier from the circle. And add the shadow effect. Change the base color of the text to something that you like. Next, the text became a bit blurry during the travel animation. So I decided to increase the travel time to slow down the camera movement a bit. First, I'll select the keyframe of the empty and move it forward 150 frames. Then I'll increase the frames of the route's build modifier by the same amount. And finally do the same for the image of me scaling down. And also the circle at location B. And that's just things that you need to do sometimes. Select the objects and move the keyframes until they fit the timing of the other objects. At the end of the animation, I'm going to add some images. First, an image of Tianmen Mountain in Zhangjiajie. Add image as mesh plane. Move it, scale it down, bring it up, and rotate it. I'll animate the scale again, just as we did before. Then I'll add another image of me arriving with my suitcase. I'll flip it 180 degrees on the y-axis, so it's facing the way I want it to. I'll turn off face orientation, because it doesn't matter if this image is turned backside up. I'll animate its reveal starting right after the first image. And again, I'm just keyframing the scale as 0, moving forward a couple of frames, keyframing the original scale, and then changing the interpolation and easing. Next, I also want to animate the images shaking a bit. To do that, right-click the Z rotation and click Insert Single Keyframe. I'll hide the scale graphs to only see the rotation curve. Go to Modifiers on the right and add a Noise Modifier. Right now it's too strong, so increase the scale and reduce the strength. Then I'll do the same thing for the other image. Okay, so far so good. At the end, I'll also draw some stuff. So add another empty grease pencil object and go into draw mode. This time I'll try another brush called Marker Chisel. First I'll draw an arrow. You can select all the vertices of a stroke in edit mode if you want to move them. Next I'll draw a little speech text coming from the image of me. The Select Lasso is a great tool for selecting vertices more precisely. Finally, I'll draw a star in the corner of the image to keep the balance. I also want to give the strokes some different colors. Select the strokes individually, create new materials with different colors, and then click Assign. Then add a build modifier to animate the reveal. Copy the noise modifier from the circle. Add shadows with the same settings as before. Great, now that part is finished. To keep some consistency, I also decided to add another image of me before the journey. I animated its scale in and out using the same techniques as before. But the timing of the transitions between the objects was a bit off, so I moved the keyframes around a bit so that the text and the images animated better together. This looks a bit smoother to me. I also added a noise modifier on the Z rotation of the image again, just like we did before. Next, because the route is so long, I decided to add another element over Chongqing City. Chongqing is famous for its spicy hot pot, so I downloaded this GIF of a hot pot from Giphy.com. In Blender, I added the image as a mesh plane. I scaled it down and positioned it over the city name. Then I animated its scale in and out as the camera goes by. Finally, I decided to leave some space in the beginning of the timeline. This is so the viewer has time to understand what they're actually looking at before things start to animate. It also gives us some space to add a transition into this clip if it's part of a longer vlog. To do this, first press A in the viewport to select all objects. Then hover over the graph editor and press Alt-H to unhide all keyframes, because we hid some of the scale keyframes before. Then press G, X, 30 to move them all 30 frames to the right. I'll also go to the end and see what a suitable end frame is. I think 900 frames will be good. That's 30 seconds at 30 frames per second. Before we render, there's one thing I forgot. The GIF doesn't have any movement yet. To fix that, select the image and set a window to the shader editor. Inside the image texture node, enable cyclic. This makes the frames of the animation play over and over again. Now we can get ready to render the animation. If you're using Eevee, make sure ray tracing is turned on. I'll also disable motion blur to avoid blurriness of the map text as the camera moves. In the output properties, I'll set the resolution percentage to 200 to render in 4K, and it shouldn't take too long to render since we're using Eevee, but it does of course make the file size larger, so you can decide what's best for you. I'll just render straight to FFmpeg video. Set the encoding container to MPEG-4 and the output quality to high quality. Before rendering, I also recommend switching to solid or wired preview. This is just to avoid unnecessary shader calculations while rendering. Finally, click Render, Render Animation, or just use the shortcut Ctrl F12. While that's rendering, let me show you how to use the grease pencil to quickly add animated overlays to your videos. Open a new blend file and open a 2D animation workspace through the splash screen, or by clicking File, New, 2D Animation. The workspace is preloaded with a camera and a stroke object. I'll select the stroke and delete all of the pre-made materials to start clean. Then I'll pick a brush, add a new material, and write like and sub as an overlay for my tutorial. Add a build modifier, a noise modifier, and whatever you might like to try. Automatic keyframing is enabled by default. You can turn that off if you want to add more strokes to your animation, or if you want to edit existing strokes. You can also select strokes in edit mode and press Alt-S to edit their thickness. Once you're done, set the resolution, frame rate, and output path. Since we want to use this as an overlay, set the file format to PNG with the RGBA alpha channel enabled. Also go to Render Properties, Film, and enable Transparent to render with a transparent background. Finally, press Ctrl-B to draw a render region around your strokes, and enable Crop to Render Region in the Output Properties. Now we don't need to waste time rendering parts that we don't need. In case you made a mistake or if you want to redraw the render region, press Ctrl-Alt-B to remove it. Then press Ctrl-F12 to render animation. Now you can just import the image sequence into your preferred video editing program and manipulate it as you would do any clip. Another thing you can do is bring a video clip into Blender and draw directly on top of it. Go to Object Mode, select the camera object, and go to the Camera Data Properties. Here you can enable background images, click Add Image, set the background source to Movie Clip, and import the clip that you want to draw on. For this to work, make sure that Transparent Background is enabled under Film in the Render Properties. Then make sure that the resolution and frame rate match the clip you imported. Now you can draw overlays using your clip as a reference. Add a build modifier and a noise modifier or something else. Copy the frame where the clip ends with Ctrl-C and paste it to the end frame with Ctrl-V. Then I'll change the materials to something more playful. When you're finished, just render out the whole frame as an RGBA PNG sequence again. This way, when you import the overlay into your video editing program, it automatically fits the video. While this might save time in some cases, it also limits the reusability of the graphics. The files also take more space, since we render out a lot of unnecessary transparent pixels instead of cropping to a render region. But it might be worth it if you don't want to spend a lot of time placing and transforming graphics for each part of your video. You can also convert images or image sequences into grease pencil if you don't want to draw yourself. First, add an image. This only works by importing it as reference. With the image selected, go to Object, Convert, Trace Image to Grease Pencil. Then click OK. This creates a new grease pencil object with a trace of the image. You can try to improve the trace by using the parameters in the pop-up menu, but usually the default values work fine. The stroke object is made out of two materials, stroke and holdout. If I go into edit mode and press A, you can see that the shape is made of two lines of edges. Press A twice to deselect all. By selecting the stroke material and pressing select, you can see that it is applied to the outer edges. Press A twice to deselect all again. The holdout material, on the other hand, is applied to the inner edges. I'll hide the holdout material for a moment and go back to the stroke. It is made of a stroke, which is the solid line that follows the edges, and a fill, which is the black color that fills the shape. I'll unhide the holdout material and select it. The holdout material is also made of a stroke and a fill. However, it has the holdout boxes ticked. These make the strokes and fills act as masks, creating transparent pixels instead of color. By disabling holdout, the base color is shown again instead. You can enable and disable strokes, fills, and holdouts to get a different look, or you can delete the holdout material entirely and just work with the stroke material. You can also delete parts, such as the inner edges, by selecting the strokes and pressing X to delete. There's a lot more that you can do that I won't go into, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how you can manipulate your objects. It's also worth noting that some modifiers might look different if your shapes are closed and filled. The build modifier, for example, does not have the same drawn-on effect as with a single stroke. That's why I only used strokes in my map animation tutorial. I'll skip the build modifier in this example. You could always lower the opacity of the reference image, create a blank grease pencil object, and trace the image yourself, but you might not get the same accuracy, of course. Maybe try some of the predefined grease pencil strokes available in the tool panel. Just drag to adjust your shape and then hit Enter to place it. If you forgot to set the strength or size of the brush, you can also adjust it in edit mode. Select the stroke and press Shift F to adjust the strength, and Alt S for the thickness. However, once placed, you cannot change the brush type. So I'll press Ctrl Z to undo and select the ink pen rough again. Play around with other shapes such as the arc. They can help you draw shapes more accurately, perfect for those just using a mouse to draw. Now the build modifier works as expected again. But I'll continue with the image shapes that we made. I only want to use the like and subscribe shapes because they fit the text I wrote earlier. So I'll select the like icon in edit mode and press P and separate by selection. Then I'll do the same for the sub icon. I'll adjust the thickness and placement of the strokes, then move the starting keyframe to the first frame of the timeline. Instead of a build modifier, I'll animate the scale like we did in the map tutorial. Remember to set the origin to geometry again to scale from the middle of the shape. Give it an interpolation that you like. I like the back interpolation for these sort of graphics. Add some noise. Adjust the color, and set an end frame. The frame rate doesn't matter much in this case, since it doesn't need to match the length of any clip. Set an output path and render out as an RGBA PNG sequence again. I'll set a render region and enable crop to render region because I want to be able to adjust this shape separately in the video editing software. Set the background to transparent and then hit render. Then import it into your video editing program and place it somewhere. This way, you can create a library of reusable graphics to use for your videos. Anyways, moving on. It's also possible to trace image sequences to grease pencil. To do this, first add a reference image, but this time import your video clip. This works with regular video clips, but this technique actually works best with smaller resolutions, so I will use a GIF instead. I'll adjust the resolution to render out the whole frame this time. I'll also scale up the image a little bit. With your image selected, go to Object, Convert, and Trace Image to Grease Pencil again. This time, change the mode from single to sequence, and then click OK. It's also worth noting that tracing images and image sequences works best with black and white images. You can use colored images, but it will only trace the areas closest to black. As you can see, only the black parts of the image have been traced. The purple and green areas you see are from the onion skin feature, which shows drawings from the frames before and after your current frame, so you can see how the motion flows between them. You can turn them off by going to Grease Pencil Options and disabling onion skin. My GIF only lasts for 47 frames, so I will select the frames after that and delete them. You can select the remaining frames, press Shift D to duplicate, and move them to the end if you want the animation to repeat. Set the end frame to where your imported clip ends. Set the background to transparent if you want to use it as an overlay with a transparent background. Then feel free to play around with the other modifiers and effects to see what you can come up with. I'll just create a new blank grease pencil object and draw a border around the GIF. Maybe add a noise modifier again. Then I'll add an empty object, select the grease pencil objects, and then select the empty last while holding Ctrl in the outliner. Then press Ctrl P to parent with Keep Transform. Now I can animate the scale of both objects together through the scale of the empty. Adjust the output properties, and then hit Render. Then import and place it into your video editing program. Just a quick note, even if your sequence has ended, you can always duplicate it. In Premiere Pro, for example, you can alt-click and drag to create a duplicate of your clip. Then if you want your clip to animate out, just select the duplicate and reverse the speed. And now the reveal animation will play in the reverse order. And now you know that this feature exists. Maybe you can find some more interesting ways to use it. And that's it. This is how to quickly create a simple travel vlog animation for social media using the grease pencil. And also how to quickly create overlay graphics for your videos. We've only scratched the surface of what the grease pencil can do, but I hope this gave you a fun introduction. If you found this tutorial helpful, please leave a like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.